What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another episode of Set Point. We are now in the Sweet 16 of the NCAA Women's Volleyball Tournament. Which team has gone home, and which team is staying alive and fighting for another day. Also, we had 3 teams, nationally seeded teams, upset in the second round. Who were they, and who were the unexpected that took a tumble in the second round and that were upset in the month of December? Also, we have the NIVC Tournament, which is in the semifinals. Find out which teams are doing good and which teams are OUT out of here. All that and more on Set Point. You're tuning in to Set Point Live on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Alright, once again, this is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, welcoming you to another edition of Set Point. Thank you all for tuning in, and happy Monday morning to you all. Alright, let's get into the volleyball action as the NCAA Tournament has reached the Sweet 16, or as many people like to call it, the regionals. So your Sweet 16 consists of Baylor versus Purdue, number 1 Baylor versus number 16 Purdue, number 9 Kentucky versus number 8 Washington, number 5 Nebraska versus number 12 Hawaii, number 3 Stanford against unranked Utah, Penn State versus unranked Cincinnati, number 7 Florida versus number 7 Minnesota versus number 10 Florida. And rounding up is number 2 Texas versus unranked Louisville. And also Penn State was ranked number 11, or seeded number 11. Alright, so this last Saturday had a lot of upsets, quite a bit of upsets, some of which were even unexpected. We're going to go to the one that shook the entire volleyball world to its core, being Cincinnati and number 6 Pitt. Cincinnati is on one, as Jordan Thompson, who is debatably the best outside hitter in the nation, and the Bearcats upset number 6 Pitt. The Pitt Panthers, the Yinzers, unfortunately, are gone. Cincinnati upset Pitt in 5 sets, winning 3-2. Cincinnati was actually down 2-1 in the match, and then they forced a 5th set, and they were actually down in the 5th set. I think they were down 12-8, and then suddenly Cincinnati starts stringing them together, and then eventually they catch up to the Panthers and take a 13-12 lead, and then Pitt eventually ties the match with a kill. But then two more points from the Bearcats, including the exclamation point where Jordan Thompson puts down a thunderous kill to give Cincinnati the big upset win over number 6 Pitt. Biggest win of the season for the Bearcats. We gotta hit the applause button for them real quick. And it wasn't just the Jordan Thompson show. There were 2 other heroes in that matchup as well, being Maria Malin, who had 19 kills, and Adria Oliver, who had 14 kills and only 2 errors, which is pretty impressive. That's a hitting percentage of .462. So very impressive in regards to Cincinnati. Cincinnati actually lost to Pitt earlier in the season, and then they got their revenge on Pitt. It's very impressive to see Cincinnati pulling a big upset like that. So, representing the American Athletic Conference to the fullest. So, big ups to Cincy. As for Pitt, they were led by Kayla Lund, who had 20 kills, Chinaza D, who had 16 kills, Stephanie Williams had 14 kills, and Lane Van Buskirk, who had 13 kills. So Pitt had a balanced attack, whereas Cincinnati had pretty much a three-headed monster led by Jordan Thompson, who, again, is debatably the best outside hitter in the nation. She even had 50 kills in one match one time, which is very incredible. I believe it was 50 kills. It's so incredible to see a player of her caliber rising to the occasion, especially when it comes to Cincinnati. They had a rough conference tournament, which, that's always tough, and then you're always hoping to get into the NCAA tournament, and then Cincy, man, they were hoping to get into the tournament, and they did, and then Cincinnati, I was a little skeptical against their match against VCU, but then I totally forgot that Jordan Thompson was on that team. I just didn't think that Cincy was actually going to pull off the big upset over number 6 Pitt, because Pitt had only one loss to their name prior to that loss, and that was to Penn State, who I thought that Pitt was going to be playing in the regionals. And that would have been a very, very interesting match. But now it's going to be Cincy versus Penn State. Now Cincinnati is the team of destiny. It's looking like the team of destiny right there. And who knows? Possibly they can go all the way. With Jordan Thompson, anything is possible. So once again, big shout out to Cincinnati. Now let's get into one of the other upsets that occurred over the weekend, which happens to be number 14 BYU getting swept by Utah in the Holy War, man. Woo! Now this one is not that surprising because Utah did have a little fire in its belly, and I wasn't ultimately surprised because, this is a rivalry game. When it comes to a rivalry game, throw out the records. And Utah lost to BYU earlier in the season, as well as, Utah being battle-tested in the Pac-12. Like, Utah faces a lot of stiff competition in the Pac-12 against teams such as Stanford, Washington, USC, Washington State, UCLA, all those teams. Even some of the lower-tier teams that didn't even make the NCAA tournament or the NIVC gave Utah a run for its money, such as like Oregon, Oregon State, the Arizona schools, and even Colorado, which finished last in the Pac-12. Whereas the West Coast Conference isn't all that competitive. I wouldn't say it's uncompetitive, but it's not as high up as the Pac-12. Like, there's only one other competitive team other than BYU, and that would be University of San Diego, which I had high hopes for as well, which I'll be talking about that a little later. Then you also have Pepperdine and Santa Clara. Pepperdine and Santa Clara didn't make the NCAA tournament. Santa Clara made the NIVC. But overall, BYU, you also have to remember that BYU has a pretty young team, that they only have 4 seniors, but one of which being Mary Lake, who is debatably one of the best liberos in the NCAA. So overall, this is kind of not a big surprising loss for BYU, but Utah is just on one, and they get to face Stanford in the regionals. They'll be playing Stanford at Stanford. They actually are one of few teams that have taken a set or two off of Stanford. They even almost beat Stanford in 5 sets the first time around at Maples Pavilion. So I expect Utah to give Stanford a battle, but, Stanford is starting to get back into their dominant selves, especially with Catherine Plummer coming back to the lineup for the Cardinals. So that'll be very interesting. And then the other upset that occurred was not too much of a surprise when it comes to upsets, was Louisville topping Western Kentucky. This is one of those interesting inter-region rivalries. Like, this is a southern rivalry to me, And Western Kentucky was kind of suspect, especially with how they had to go 5 with Rice. So, Louisville is from the ACC, which is from the same conference as Pitt. So, Louisville facing Western Kentucky, this is it was kind of unusual to see West Louisville come out on top, but not overly surprising, because when you're Louisville and you're just barely getting into the NCAA tournament and you're having to face stiff competition such as Pitt and Florida State and Georgia Tech and Notre Dame, heck, even Boston College is kind of up there. You're kind of battle tested. And when you're Louisville, you don't have the Mustangs like some of these other teams like Pitt has. So Louisville definitely deserves a lot of credit for pulling off the upset and making it all the way to the Sweet 16. For me, I'm kind of disappointed in how Pitt lost in the second round. At home, mind you, I thought Pitt was going to have a deep run. I was going off and rambling saying that Pitt was going to have a pretty deep run this year, considering they had only one loss, and they were deep when it came to talent across the board. But it seems like when it comes postseason time, they turn to ghosts, which, it's disappointing, because I think Pitt had so much potential. I had Pitt going to the Elite Eight and taking on Stanford, and that would have been a very interesting match. Pitt fans are saying that Pitt was seeded poorly, but you got the best possible matchup. You got another matchup with Cincinnati. Nothing is supposed to be handed to you. So you're actually supposed to go out there and actually take down your competition. Like, when you're up 2-1 in the match, you're pretty much got to go all gas, no brakes in the fourth set. And, they were very suspect in that first set when they were trailing for the most part. They had to come from behind in order to take down Cincy in the first set. So, Pitt, you kind of disappointed me. I'm pretty disappointed in you, considering you lost. I mean, Cincy is good, but I didn't think they'd be on the level of Pitt. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm very happy for Cincinnati and for Jordan Thompson, who could be the National Player of the Year, but notice the words could be, because there are plenty of other nominees up there for that honor. But, Pitt, come on. You're in front of your fans. You went a perfect 18-0 in your conference. You even swept Penn State at Penn State. Like, what are you doing, Pitt? Like, come on. Now this means that Penn State will get a home matchup against Cincinnati, which will be very cool. I'll be very interested to see how Cincinnati does against Penn State. Penn State coming from the tough Big 12 conference, taking on Cincinnati, who comes from the American Athletic Conference. So it's going to be really cool, if you ask me. Now let's go over some of the other second-round matchups. Baylor versus USC. USC actually led that first set, and I was thinking that they're actually going to give Baylor a good matchup, and then Baylor took the wind out of their sails by stealing that first set 25-23, and that pretty much swung the momentum all over to Baylor, as they pretty much took care of business against USC. Sadly, the Kalia Lanier era is over, and unfortunately she didn't reach the all-time kill leader, but she's second when it comes to kills all-time at USC, behind Sammy Bricio, one of the better USC players, especially at the outside hitter position. So big ups to USC for a great season, but Baylor was just too much, at least USC got out of the first round. That's one thing, but they're still trapped in that round of 32 limbo. So tough luck for the Trojans. But Baylor, this is actually their first Sweet 16 appearance in quite some time. You have to go quite a ways back in order to remember Baylor's first Sweet 16 appearance, or last Sweet 16 appearance. So this Baylor team is definitely living up to expectations, with Yasonia Presley leading the way. She's definitely a force for the Bears. She didn't even lead the team in kills. You also have to watch out. You also have to be in awe in terms of the other players on Baylor, such as Marieke Vandermark, who led Baylor in kills with 13, and then Shelley Stafford had 12 kills on one error, hitting 733. Vandermark also hit 706 and had only one hitting error as well. So that just goes to show you that Baylor is deep. It's not just the Yasonia Presley show; it's the Shelley Stafford and Marieke Vandermark show. So it's very, very cool to see that. As for USC, they got some good contributions, such as Kyle Lanier, who had 14 kills in her final collegiate volleyball game. Then Brooke Botkin had 11 kills. We haven't heard much of her, but she came back just in time for the NCAA tournament. She had a very solid game for the Trojans. Amelia Wesk had 8 kills, but it just wasn't enough. USC once again lost in the second round. But that's all right. USC had a great year. Now, as for who Baylor will take on, they will face number 16 Purdue, who beat Marquette in 4 sets. I knew Purdue was going to have somewhat trouble with this, considering Marquette is a good team. Don't get me wrong. The problem is that Purdue has just been battle tested in the Big Ten, and more importantly, is that Marquette has had the inconsistent label on them, while Purdue while not boasting the best Big Ten conference record, they pretty much just took Marquette to town. Purdue has a lot of offensive options, led by Caitlin Newton, who had 23 kills. Grace Cleveland had 15 kills, and Brake Moeller had 10 kills. Very impressive showing by the Boilermakers. Marquette had only one player in double digits when it came to kills, and that was Allie Barber, who had 15 kills. That was about it. They didn't really hit the ball all that well. No player had hit more than 280, 286, which is kind of a problem. But, like I said, Marquette has the inconsistency label on them. So Purdue will move on to the Sweet 16, where they will face number 1 Baylor, so that's going to be an interesting matchup. So now let's move on to the other region. Let's move down to the Washington region, where Kentucky swept away Michigan, which, that's actually a very impressive win. I thought Western Kentucky was going to have to go 4 with them, but overall, I thought Kentucky played a solid game overall. Kentucky being the co-SEC champion, having beaten Florida twice. They were led by Leah Edmond, who had 15 kills, and Allie Stumler, who had 11 kills. Edmond hit a solid 375 in the match, so that's very impressive by her. As for Michigan, they were led by Paige Jones, who had 16 kills, but that was about it. Sydney Wetterstrom had 9 kills. Again, they didn't really hit the ball that well. Only a few of their players hit the ball well, and they didn't have too many kills. Corey Crocker was the best player that hit the ball well, hitting 500 but only having 4 kills. So overall, I knew Michigan wasn't going to win that one, but at least they represented the Big Ten well. The Big Ten is indeed a Power 5 conference, and they definitely showed it by winning their first round game against Northern Kentucky. So as for who Kentucky will play, they will face Washington in the Sweet 16 or the regionals. Washington swept away North Carolina, another SEC team that fell victim in the second round as Washington took down the Gamecocks. Washington was led by none other than Kara Bejema, who had 18 kills and hit 429. She's definitely been a force for the Huskies this season. The problem is that Washington just has her. And can Kara Bejema carry the team all by herself? Absolutely not. The second kill leader for Washington was Lauren Sanders, who had 6 kills. That kind of surprises me a little, and it's a little bit of a cause for alarm, considering you just can't have one player carrying the entire team. At the same time, they didn't have too many kills. They only had 36 kills, and half of them came from Bejema, who impressively hit 429 for the match and only had 3 hitting errors. So when you're hitting a high hitting number like that and having a high number of kills, you're doing something quite good. So again, big ups to Kara Bejima. She's definitely one of the more talented players, especially coming out of the Pac-12, which has been quite impressive. I think she's probably the second best player, and I think she probably got second in Pac-12 Player of the Year behind Mac May of UCLA. So there's that. As for South Carolina, they were led by Michaela Shields, who had 11 kills, while Brittany McLean and Michaela Robinson had 7 kills each. So Washington will face Kentucky in the Elite Eight, or I'm sorry, not the Elite Eight, the Sweet 16 or the Regionals, whatever you call it. So that'll be an interesting matchup. It's kind of the matchup I expected, but 8 versus 9 it's tough to pick against some of those teams in the second round. I honestly think that Colorado State would have given Washington a better matchup, considering Colorado State had all the momentum going into the NCAA tournament. They only had one loss, and then suddenly South Carolina comes out of nowhere, straight from the SEC, and they just topple the Rams, which, it's kind of surprising, but this just goes to show you that everyone is 0-0. No one cares what you've done in the regular season. All that matters is the postseason. So there's that. Now let's go into the bottom left-hand portion of the bracket. Nebraska took down Missouri in 4 sets. That Nebraska team, not too surprising that they would win, but I knew they wouldn't have an easy match, but I knew they were going to get the job done. They were led by Jazz Sweet, who had 17 kills, Lexi Sun had 13 kills, and Lauren Stivrins and Maddie Kubik each had 11 kills. Kubik was recently named the Big Ten Freshman of the Year, which is very scary for opposing teams because this Nebraska team is going to be good going forward. So yeah, they're definitely a team to watch for. I definitely think they can still make a deep run, but can their young team get back to the promised land that is the NCAA final? That remains to be seen. As for Missouri, they were led by Lakedor member Mene, who had 19 kills. Dariana Hollingsworth had 15 kills, and Kylie DeBerg had 14 kills. Oh yeah, and Tiana Omazik had 9 kills as well. Hollingsworth hit the ball well. She had 400. Member Mene hit 295, which is kind of impressive. I knew Missouri wasn't going to make it easy on Nebraska. Nebraska is definitely a good team. But, as for Missouri, they're just not on the level of Missouri. Or Missouri's not on the level of Nebraska. I definitely think that they did their part of giving Nebraska that challenge. But I kind of thought that I knew they were going to push it to at least 4. But, Missouri is just not, they're not there just because, they don't have that experience that Nebraska has when it comes to the NCAA tournament. But big ups to Missouri. That's still an impressive showing to take a set off of a national finalist from last year. And, Lexi Sun, it's not just the Lexi Sun show when it comes to Nebraska. It's the Jazz Sweet, Lauren Stivrins, and Maddie Kubik show as well. So it's not just a one-person show. It's a multiple-person show. So Nebraska will advance to the regional finals or the Sweet 16, where they will play Hawaii, who swept away San Diego. Now, this was the matchup that surprised me the most. I thought San Diego was going to pull off the upset because San Diego knew what to expect from Hawaii, and they knew what to expect from playing at Stan Sheriff Center. The problem was that San Diego just didn't execute. They didn't execute well, and more importantly, they didn't play the same San Diego volleyball that they had played in West Coast Conference play. Now, Hawaii is definitely a cut above the rest, and they too are playing some of their best volleyball. They definitely have a lot of offensive firepower, such as players such as McKenna Ross, Brooke Van Sickle, Hannah Helvig, Amber Agid, And Noreen Ayazia, man, her serves are continued. Although she didn't have any service aces, in this match, which is quite surprising. She's definitely continues to get the job done. This is definitely one of the more impressive victories for Hawaii, and definitely a big victory for the Big West Conference, considering three Big West Conference teams made the NCAA tournament, which is quite surprising because you only get to see like one or two. But it just goes to show you that the Big West Conference is definitely deep, and they definitely deserve some respect on their name. So Hawaii definitely did their part in regards to taking out San Diego. San Diego had a chance to take the first set, but then a kill from Hannah Helvig closed the door on San Diego's hopes, and San Diego just wasn't the same. They had an early lead in the third set, and then Hawaii just turned the tables and pretty much just took the lead and never looked back. So tough one for San Diego. I actually thought San Diego was going to pull the upset because, again, San Diego knew what to expect from Hawaii. They played them earlier in the season. They took them to a fifth set, took Hawaii to a fifth set, but they just didn't have what it took this time around. I know it's tough playing in Stan Sheriff Center, but it's the NCAA tournament. You got to be prepared for anything. So, yeah. So now let's go into the final portion of the bottom left-hand bracket. Texas A&M taking down Rice in 4 sets. I honestly thought Rice was going to win this one because this is one of Rice's special teams. But Texas A&M, man, that little team from the SEC, they're definitely proving that they're worthy of a national seed. And more importantly, they're definitely proving that the SEC is pretty darn tough, I didn't expect Texas A&M to be so good, but that 22-7 record is definitely impressive, especially coming from a tough conference like the SEC, which is home to teams like Florida, South Carolina, Missouri, and Kentucky. So Texas A&M was led by Holland Hans, who had 28 kills, which is very impressive. She did have 10 hitting errors, which is kind of a little demoralizing for me, and for her, but I see more good when it comes to the 28 kills. She hit a solid 247. It just wasn't the greatest, though. 10 hitting errors kind of is a red flag that she's taking too many swings or she's not taking the smartest swings, but that's besides the point. Then Lauren Davis had 13 kills for Texas A&M. Then Mallory Talbert also had 10 kills to lead the way for Texas A&M. Rice was led by Nicole Lennon, who had 15 kills. Grace Morgan had 12 kills, and then Anoda Edekunal, who had 11 kills. They didn't really hit they didn't have some of the best hitting percentages, considering none of their players totaled up to hit no better than 280 or 286. To me, your best hitting percentage is definitely in the 300s. Like if you hit 300 in a match, you're solid. But if you're not hitting 300, you're a little meh. The 200s are okay. Like 250 to 299 is very solid. Anything a little less than that is eh. So Texas A&M will advance to the regional finals. Big shout out to H-Town Blake Henley. If you're listening to this, Blake, which I doubt you are, Texas A&M does have a very good women's volleyball team. Texas A&M will face Wisconsin in the regional finals as Wisconsin took down UCLA. No real surprise that Wisconsin won. Especially since it was just Mac May and Savvy Simo leading the way. The thing is about UCLA is that it's great that they got back into the NCAA tournament. The problem is it's just that Mac May and Savvy Simo alone could not have carried that team. Cannot carry that team. As for Wisconsin, them being battle tested and experienced, and especially when it comes to Big Ten play, Wisconsin's out to prove all their doubters wrong, and that they belong in the NCAA, that they belong as a national seed, and that they are one of the favorites to win the NCAA tournament, as Molly Haggerty led the way in kills with 14 kills. She only had 4 hitting errors and she hit 370. And then Dana Retke had 10 kills with only 1 hitting error, and she hit 360. Grace Loberg is definitely a name to name, as she had 9 kills with 0 hitting errors, and she hit 529, which is very impressive. So this Wisconsin team is definitely proving itself worthy of that national number 4 seed. And the thing is, I think Wisconsin could go all the way. I think of all the national seeds, ranked seeds on the left-hand side, I think they have the best chance of going to the NCAA finals. I just think they're just more experienced than the other teams. Baylor has some good teams, but they haven't been to the Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final 4 type of deal. So honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if Wisconsin went all the way to at least the Final 4. So overall, I think Wisconsin definitely is a team to watch for. UCLA definitely had a great season, though. You definitely can't take away the great season that UCLA had. The problem is just that it just can't be Mac May and Savvy Simo by themselves. Other players have got to step up. Jenny Mosser had 6 kills, and Lexi Hadrich had 5 kills, but she did hit negative 67, which to me is pretty much disappointing. It's not disappointing, but in a match like that, you have to come up big. So there's that. So Wisconsin and Texas A&M will be facing each other in the regional finals or the Sweet 16. Then we have Stanford taking down Cal Poly. This wasn't too much of a surprise. Stanford just overpowered the Mustangs and just took down Cal Poly in straight sets. It wasn't, it just wasn't Cal Poly's game. Maya Dvoracek and Madeline Mercer did all they could against Stanford, but it just wasn't enough. Stanford just has too much firepower with Catherine Plummer, Audrina Fitzmaurice, Madeline Gates, and that was pretty much it. Those 3 players, just straight up were balling. Even Jenna Gray got onto the kill action. She had 5 kills and hit 833. It just goes to show you that setters can get kills too. So Stanford will move on to the regional finals or the Sweet 16, where they will face Utah. Nice little Pac-12 rivalry going on there. This kind of reminds me of last year, where Washington State advanced to the Sweet 16 to face Stanford. But I think Stanford's going to win that one, but I'll get into that a little bit later. Then Penn State took down Towson. I was a little surprised. Penn State took down Towson in 4 sets. I was a little surprised to see Penn State losing that first set. Maybe it was just a little bit of a wake-up call, or just a little bit of a moment, a moment in the spotlight, considering those teams are, sometimes it happens. We're only human, and that sometimes when you're caught up at home and you see a bunch of raucous fans rocking and rolling in Penn State Hall, it's tough, and then I think losing that first set was the perfect storm for Penn State, because they managed to take the next 3 sets with no problems, and they will advance to the Sweet 16, where they will face Cincinnati. I didn't talk about Minnesota and Creighton. Minnesota took down Creighton in 5 sets. Creighton was actually up 2-0 in the match, and it looked like Creighton was going to do all it could to take down Minnesota. The 4th set was back and forth. Minnesota won that 4th set 26-24. I believe that was the set. I'm not entirely sure, but I know it was decided after. It went up after 25 points. So Minnesota definitely deserves credit for for winning that fourth set. And then they won the fifth set quite nicely. It was tight until after the side change where Minnesota just straight up just took over from there, and that was that. Minnesota was just too much for them. As Minnesota will take down Creighton in 5 sets, and Minnesota will advance to the regional finals or the Sweet 16, where they will face Florida. Florida swept UCF. I already talked about this matchup. This wasn't too surprising, considering Florida is just really good, and it's tough to beat Florida at the Swamp, which is where Florida plays. It's basically the nickname for the Florida Gymnasium. So overall, I think that it'll be an interesting matchup to see Minnesota and Florida taking on one another. So who knows? Maybe Florida will pull off some upset magic and take down Minnesota. Who knows? But Minnesota's out. Like I said, they're still out to prove that they are still one of the more elite programs, and they're out to prove that they are for real, and that last year's loss in the Sweet 16 was nothing more than a fluke. So, and keep in mind, Minnesota was the number 2 seed, so there's that as well. And let's get into the final matchup where Louisville upset Western Kentucky. They will face number 2 Texas, which nearly was upset by UC Santa Barbara, but escaped in a 5-set victory. So big ups to Texas, and let's hit the applause button for all those teams that made it to the Sweet 16. Into the 16 teams that lost in the round of 32. Congratulations on an amazing season. There's nothing to hold your heads down about. To get that far is quite amazing. And for some teams, they got that weren't even expected to get out of the first round, or that were expected to get swept in the second round. Some of those teams defied expectations. So it's quite amazing to see teams defy expectations and to pretty much just go the distance, especially teams that have nothing left to lose. Like Cincinnati didn't have much to lose against Pitt. They were down 2-1. Their backs were against the wall. They scratched and clawed their way back into the match and eventually pulled the upset against Pitt. Santa Barbara was the same thing. They were up 2-1 on Texas, but they just couldn't hold on. But again, UC Santa Barbara had nothing left to lose in their matchup against Pitt. So there's that. So before we get into the NCAA Sweet 16, it's time for another segment of Milestone Alert. So this is So we had a lot of Milestone Alert players from last year, starting with Kendall White, who is now the all-time dig leader at Penn State, who has 1,958 kills and counting. Then we have Brittany Witt, who is also the all-time dig leader at Creighton, as she pulled that off in their 5-set loss against Minnesota, which is quite impressive. Molly Haggerty, who of Wisconsin, reached 1,000 kills for her career, and she's only a junior, so there's plenty more kills where that came from, especially in this tournament. So big ups to Molly. She definitely deserves all those kills, and she could possibly reach 1,500 by her senior season. Then we have Kristen Largay, who of American, who is the all-time dig leader at American, who is the only Patriot League player to eclipse 2,000 digs, and the only player in American University history to reach 2,000 digs, which is very impressive. Then we have Molly Wonders, who put up 1,289 assists, which is which is in this season, which is very impressive for Towson. And she finishes up her career with 3,522 assists, which is the most all-time in the Tiger era when it comes to 30 and 25-point scorings. And then we also have Corey Crocker of Michigan Volleyball, who is the all-time hitting percentage leader at Michigan with 335. So big ups to Corey of Michigan, and big ups to Molly Wonders of Towson. And once again, big ups to all those players who reached the milestone alert. You all deserve the applause button. Alright, now let's get into the Sweet 16 picks. So here are my picks for the Sweet 16. Here we go! Alright, so first matchup is Baylor versus Purdue. You know, Purdue has had a great run this year. You know, they weren't really on the radar until Big Ten play. Then they also got that big win over Nebraska in Big Ten play. That was huge for them. That definitely put them on the map. However, Baylor is just too much for them. You know, Baylor will be too much for them. I think Baylor takes down Purdue. I'll give Purdue one set, but then Baylor takes three more. So I'll predict Baylor taking down Purdue. So there's that. Now there's that in that matchup. So next up is number 8 Washington versus number 9 Kentucky. You know, it's tough to pick 8 versus 9. You know, Washington has been great, has been one of the better dark horse teams, as they have Kara Bejema, but again, can Kara Bejema alone carry Washington to victory? I highly doubt it. Kentucky, on the other hand, has multiple players that can step up for the Wildcats, such as Leah Edmond and Allie Stumler. I'm going to go with Washington. However, I am a firm believer of teams that have been below the radar despite not being in the top 4. I'm going to take Washington to barely get by Kentucky. I think Washington, being in the Pac-12, has been battle-tested and prepared for this. Nothing against Kentucky, but I think Washington's wins and losses in the Pac-12 definitely have proven worthy for this moment, and I think Washington is just going to come out with I'm going to say Washington wins in 4 sets as well. And then I'm going to say Kara Bejema gets 30 kills. You know, I am also predicting that Washington will have at least another player in double digits when it comes to kills. So, you know, Washington alone cannot have Kara Bejema just carrying the team. You know, everyone else has to step up, you know. But I'm confident Washington can get the job done against Kentucky. Next up to the bottom left-hand bracket, we have Nebraska versus Hawaii. Believe it or not, I can't believe I'm going to say this. I'm going to take Hawaii to upset Nebraska. Now, believe it or not, Nebraska is good, but they just don't have the seniors on the team. You know, they have 0 seniors, and more importantly, they're young. You know, they graduated a lot from last year's team. Hawaii, on the other hand, is definitely playing their best volleyball as of late, and they're on a 12-game winning streak, and I think they're more healthy as can be, and they're definitely playing up. They're definitely playing up to their competition, and they're setting the bar for some of these teams. I think Hawaii's senior experience and behind the serving of Noreen Ayazia is just going to get the job done for the Rainbow Wahine. We haven't really seen Hawaii in the Elite Eight in quite some time, so I think this is Hawaii's best chance to get into the Elite Eight and possibly do more damage. So I think Hawaii barely pulls off the upset against Nebraska in 5 sets. So So yeah, and I'm back in the Big West. Yeah, it's not again, it's not a regional thing, but I just think Hawaii has more senior experience. They haven't really had the Sweet 16 experience like they have had in the past, but with players such as Brooke Van Sickle and Hannah Helvig leading the charge, I just think Hawaii is just a little bit of a cut above of Nebraska. I say Hawaii wins in 5 sets. And I still expect Hawaii fans to travel well, because Hawaii fans definitely travel well when it comes to volleyball, but so do Nebraska fans, and this game is going to be at Nebraska. So there's that. Then we have number 13 Texas A&M versus at number 4 Wisconsin. I got to go with Wisconsin in 4 sets. I expect Texas A&M to put up at least some sort of fight, but I just think Wisconsin's overall experience and just being battle tested in the Big Ten is just going to prove too much for A&M. A&M has been battle tested as well in the SEC when it comes to teams like Florida and Kentucky and Missouri and heck, even South Carolina. But I just think Texas A&M the buck is going to stop there for when it comes to facing Wisconsin. But, it's the NCAA tournament. Crazier things have happened. But I got Wisconsin beating Texas A&M in 4 sets. Then we have number 3 Stanford versus unranked Utah. Pac-12 matchup right here. Utah, I've been a firm believer of Utah and how that they've had such great games, and that they're playing their best volleyball as of late, and it was a bit of a tough break that they finished 4th in the Pac-12, but I think finishing 4th in the Pac-12 has kind of motivated the Utes in order to make it known that it doesn't matter where you finish, it's how you finish. And Utah is definitely the team that finishes strong, and they definitely play their best play. They definitely play their best volleyball in the NCAA tournament. And against Stanford, they definitely have pushed the Cardinal out of their comfort zone. However, I think Stanford is just going to win. I think Stanford is just has too much senior leadership in the tank for the Utes. I think Stanford wins in 4 sets. I'd be very surprised to see Utah getting swept against Stanford. So I do expect Utah to take at least 1 set off of the Cardinal. They know what to expect when it comes to Maples Pavilion. So overall, I just think Stanford is just too much for them, especially with a talented player such as Catherine Plummer and many other talented players as well. So I got Stanford over Utah. Then we have Penn State versus Cincinnati. I was a firm believer to believe that Penn State was going to be a shoo-in for the Elite Eight after Pitt lost. But you consider this. Cincinnati has debatably one of the best outside hitters in the nation, being Jordan Thompson. But it's not just Jordan. But again, it's not just Jordan Thompson. It's other players stepping up for the Bearcats, such as Maria Mallon and Audria Oliver. So it's not just the Jordan Thompson show. It's other players stepping up. This is one of the more interesting matchups, considering, Cincinnati delivered a resounding blow to Pitt on the road, and they got revenge over the Panthers. However, it's tough to beat Penn State at Penn State. You have to be among one of the more elite teams to get a win at Penn State when facing the Nittany Lions. And Russ Rose is just too much of a great coach. He's coached for 40 years, and Penn State has made the NCAA tournament in all of those years, especially when the NCAA tournament was first formed. So back in Russ Rose's second year as Penn State's head coach. So, I got Penn State beating Cincinnati. I'm going to take Penn State in 5, though. I think Cincinnati pushes Penn State out of their comfort zone, but I just think Penn State is just going to be too much for Cincinnati. It's Big Ten versus American. I just think the Big Ten is just, I gotta go with the Power 5 conference. It's kind of the safe bet right there. So now let's go to the bottom right-hand corner of the bracket where we have Minnesota versus Florida. Tough matchup right here. Minnesota and Florida are both nationally ranked, and 7 versus 10 can go either way. You have Minnesota, which is very talented. They have talent across the board, and they played really well in Big Ten conference play, having players such as Adana Rollins and Alexis Hart, who are the two-headed monster. And then you also have other great gameplay from players such as Kylie Miller and Regan Pittman. Pittman didn't really have her best matchup, but she's definitely one of the more talented players that when she gets it going, she definitely gets it going. And then you have Florida, who has cruised through their first 2 matchups. So they have players such as Paige Hammonds, Rachel Kramer in the middle. We haven't really seen Holly Carlton as well, and they also have Thayer Hall, which she didn't really play against UCF in the second round. So that could also be a thing for the Gators. I'm going to go ahead and pick Minnesota to win this one. However, I wouldn't be surprised if Florida won. If Florida wins, it would be no surprise. But I got to go with Minnesota for this one. I think Minnesota, again, they're out to prove that they are indeed an elite program, and that last year was last year. This is the Sweet 16 is where Minnesota lost to last year. So Minnesota definitely is going to want to exercise its Sweet 16 demons when they face Florida. I think Minnesota just has a little bit more in the tank, and I'm going to say Minnesota wins in 5. I think Minnesota gets pushed to the brink, but I think they're just going to pull it out in the end. Florida definitely has talent, unless we know what happened with Thayer Hall. We know what happened with Thayer Hall. I just don't think that Minnesota is going to lose this one. And again, being in the Big Ten, it's a battle every night. You face a lot of talented teams, even teams that didn't even make the NCAA tournament, such as Ohio State, Indiana, Iowa, you name it. So I think Minnesota just barely squeaks by Florida. Then we have Louisville and Texas. Louisville is the little engine that could. They think they can. Pulling off one upset in the second round. Whereas Texas, they barely got past UC Santa Barbara. Now, while I am a firm believer of teams playing their best volleyball at the right time, you have to consider this. Texas is at home. It's hard to beat Texas at home. And, UCSB was only the first team to take 2 sets off of Texas. However, UCSB was definitely one of the more underrated teams, and they were definitely one of the more improved teams as well, as Santa Barbara won their first NCAA tournament game since 2004, and then they definitely have also have one of the best outside hitters in the nation, being Lindsey Ruddens. Texas, however, found a way around that. As for how they're going to do against Louisville, I think Texas is going to take down Louisville. I think Texas is back on track, and Jordan Exelton, that's a name you want to remember. Jordan Exelton is playing her best volleyball, and she's only a freshman too. She had 22 kills against UCSB, and she also had 8 digs to go along with it as well. And she had a couple blocks here and there. She also hit .426 in that match. And then Breon Butler had 14 kills, and Nakia White had 17 kills. Those 3 players only combined for 7 hitting errors, and they had some good hitting percentages as well. Preferably Exelton, and she's only a freshman. That's the scary thing about Logan Exelton. She's only a freshman, and she's hitting big numbers like that. So I'm going to pick Texas to sweep away Louisville. Nothing against Louisville, but I think the buck is going to stop there when it comes to Louisville. I just think that Texas is just too good, man. They're just too good, and they're just on a tear, and they're out to get. They want to prove themselves that they are indeed. They want to be national champions, because Texas hasn't won a national championship in women's volleyball since 2012. Yeah, 2012 when they beat Oregon in straight sets. So I just think that Texas is going to take down Louisville in straight sets. So those are my picks: Baylor, Washington, Hawaii, Wisconsin, Stanford, Penn State, Minnesota, and Texas. Most of them, I've only got one upset, which is kind of sad. I was thinking about picking Minnesota, but then I saw that Thayer Hall wasn't featured on the stat sheet, and she just wasn't featured in general, so I imagine she's battling some sort of injury, so there's that. So I think, I honestly think that Minnesota's got the edge. And overall, when it comes to my picks, I'm 38-10, which isn't bad. 38-10 is kind of a good record overall. So if I'm doing the math, that is a correct percentage of 79%, which is pretty good. Now let's get on to the NIVC, and then we're going to close it out. The NIVC quarterfinals are set. South Dakota faces UT Arlington. Tulsa faces Weber State. Georgia Tech faces Liberty, and TCU faces Colgate. I'm taking South Dakota over UT Arlington, Tulsa over Weber State, Georgia Tech over Liberty, and then Colgate over TCU. The NIVC, people say that the NIVC isn't one of the more noteworthy matchups, but I gotta show some love for the NIVC. Those teams deserve a second chance. So, and also to close out, I also gotta give a shout out to Feather River in the California Community College Athletic Association, or the 3C2A, as they took down IVC in 5 sets to win their first ever state women's volleyball title. Big ups to Irvine Valley, or IVC Irvine Valley. Big ups to Irvine Valley. They're coached by Tom Pestalacy, who is a living legend and an overall great guy. He used to also be an associate coach for Hawaii. But if you know who Tom Pestalacy is, he is an overall great guy. You can't go wrong with him. Just positive vibes all around, and he's a family man, and more importantly, he's a great coach overall, and he recruits pretty well as well. But that's not the point. The point is that he also sends a majority of his players to the next level, being the NCAA or the NAIA. But, Tom Pestalacy is just a straight-up great overall guy. If you know him, then it's just good vibes overall. And, yeah, big ups to Tom Pestalacy. If you're listening to this, Tom, and which I highly doubt, big ups to you. With all that said, that's going to do it for this episode of Set Point. As my boy Larry B would say, cue the music, because we're out of here. Once again, this is your boy Teran Rodriguez signing off, y'all. I will be seeing you later on in the week for another episode of Set Point, where I will be recapping the Sweet 16 and getting into the Elite 8. Have a great weekend and a great week overall, and enjoy some volleyball, why don't you?